And what is the weather like? Hi, Nikki Cobb. Welcome, everyone. We'll get started here shortly. We'll give everybody an opportunity to get logged in and get settled. Gosh, that number has jumped up. We're at 139 attendees. Hi from Houston. Hi, Katie. I see some familiar faces from my MLA world. Toussaint. Hi, Lindsay. Hi, KT. Martha from St. Louis. And if you all change your chat from chatting with hosts and panelists to everyone, that way everyone will get to see your messages as they come through. So welcome. If you are just joining us, we have asked everyone to tell us where they're logging in from today. Jenny Stout in Richmond, Virginia. Southern Maine, New York, Boulder. Welcome everyone, Baltimore. All over. They're scrolling by so fast now. I can't keep up. I can't read that fast anymore. So so welcome. So if I don't shout you out, blame my head. Don't blame my heart. So I think we are at 181 and it is 4:01, and I do want to be mindful of everybody's time. So we will go ahead and get started. If presenters, my panelists, are you all ready?
Yep.
Okay, well, let's get this show on the road. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Shannon Jones, and I am logging in today from Charleston, South Carolina. And I am so excited to be here with you today, but also equally excited to welcome Brittany and Brittany, and James, who will be presenting Moving Beyond Recruitment and Hiring, How to Retain Academic Librarians of Color. Before we get started today, let's go over a few logistical items. This session is being recorded. Captions are available during this session by clicking on the Live CC button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Thanks to Susan Thomas for providing these. Please use the Q&A feature for any presentation questions. You can choose to do this anonymously. There will be a 10 to 15 minutes for a Q&A session at the end of the presentation today. Please use the chat for general comments or technical issues. Danny Cook is going to be monitoring the chat today, so she'll be looking for any questions or comments that you make in the chat box. Danny will also be adding some links to the chat as the presenters are presenting throughout the presentation. One of the documents that she's going to share is for collaborative resource sharing. If you think of while the presenters are presenting or at any point during this session, if you think of a related reading, a podcast, a video, or something else that you'd like to share with the attendees, we can add those links to the comms recommended resources shared Zotero. The next link is our conference code of conduct, and that will be added to the chat box. So please take a look at that so that you see what the expectations are while you are attending the conference. And now I'm going to turn the mic over to the presenters. They're going to introduce themselves, and I am going to go off camera, and I will come back on at the end of the session to close out the session. So Brittany, and James, the session is yours.
Thanks, Shannon. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us at Moving Beyond Recruitment and Hiring, How to Retain Academic Librarians of Color. We will be interchangeably using the phrases BIPOC librarians, Black, Indigenous people of color, librarians of color, and racialized librarians, as those are the terms relevant in different countries, places, or institutions. And if you identify as any of those things, please use an asterisk ahead of your question in the Q&A so we can prioritize your questions at the end. We'll go on to our land acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge that we did our research in Las Vegas, Nevada, which is one of the traditional lands of at least 15 bands of Southern Paiute or Nuwu tribes who were descendants of Tadunu or desert people. These lands were first claimed by Mexico, and the lands and people were disrupted by trade routes, the Mexican-American War, the Mormons, the railroad, and the so-called founders and original permanent settlers of Las Vegas. The colonization brought disease and death to the indigenous people, especially tuberculosis and the measles. It brought destruction of their land and resources and erasure of their culture through forced assimilation to white American culture. We are guests on this land and have committed ourselves to listening to and supporting indigenous people through financial contributions to the Indian Land Tenure Foundation, participating in collection development practices that honor indigenous identities and ways of knowing in the present tense, and by asking the University of Nevada, Las Vegas to offer Southern Paiute language classes. On to introductions. My name is Brittany Sterling, pronoun she, her, and I am the Social Sciences and Interdisciplinary Studies Librarian at UNLV.
Hello, my name is Brittany Paloma Fiedler, she, her, Aya, and I am a teaching and learning librarian at UNLV.
My name is James Cheng, he, him. I am a data analyst at the Library of Congress, and previously I was a library data analyst at UNLV. I state that my participation is personal, and the contents of the presentation and my own thoughts do not reflect Library of Congress policy or position in any way. So in our literature review, we found two interesting quotes 5 years apart. In 2007, the literature on the retention of minorities in academic librarianship is weak and close to non-existent. And in 2012, research on the retention of academic librarians of color is practically non-existent. The retention of mid-career academic librarians of color as a distinct topic has not received enough attention. At the end of this presentation, we will have a very thorough bibliography for further reading. Our project. This project was sponsored by the American Library Association's Office for Diversity, Literacy, and Outreach Services through a diversity research grant, which allowed us to offer a gift card to our BIPOC participants in exchange for their time and labor. We started with a screening tool where we ensured that participants were current or former academic librarians in the US or Canada, self-identified as mid-career, and are people of color. We also used the screening tool to randomly invite 25 participants to a semi-structured interview. Our participants worked at a variety of institution types. 3 of them were at the top of library leadership, while 8 had no supervisory responsibilities, and the other 14 were in between. We also used snowball sampling to try to find participants who left librarianship or academia. Of the 25, 4 had left academic librarianship. 1 is working in retail and wants to go into K-12 education. 2 are in the nonprofit sector, and 1 is working in a government library. We transcribed the interviews in order to do qualitative analysis of the data through coding. For this presentation, we did 1 round of in vivo coding, which means our codes are direct quotes in order to prioritize and honor the participants' voices. Then we did a 2nd round of descriptive coding related to the topics of this presentation.
We asked all of our participants what professional accomplishments they were most proud of. 5 themes emerged from their responses: association participation, knowledge creation, validation, connection, and innovation. The most popular type of work was actually committee and organizational service work. 1 participant captured all of these feelings when they said, quote, "I was asked if I joined this new ALA interest group. I was like, okay, I don't know what this is, sure. And then those rooms were super white. It's me and another BIPOC librarian looking at each other like, what?" The importance of having people in the room. I'm really proud of that work. Other service work discussed included national work with ALA, ACRL, ethnic affiliates, book awards, and also campus committees. The relationship BIPOC librarians have with diversity committees is complicated. But we noticed that librarians were either very energized and proud of their work on EDI committees or had left those spaces burned out and disillusioned. Interestingly, none of the 4 participants who left academic librarianship cited service as their proudest accomplishment. All 4 librarians who left, though, described knowledge creation as their greatest accomplishment. One said, the diversity research work that I did on my own that no one cared about, no one gave a shit about. I showed myself that if I had wanted to stay in the field, I could have carved a lane out for myself in diversity work. And that made me feel proud because I did it all by myself with no mentor support. Most interesting is that 8 librarians who discussed this work were not tenure track, but meanwhile, a tenure track participant described how she tried to pick passion projects that bring her joy. These are ones that were personally interesting to her, even if they didn't check the boxes of tenure expectations. Many people expressed surprise and delight when their audiences were large or their work was well received or cited by others. BIPOC librarians were proud of the things that validated their work, their ideas, their reputation, and their perceived worth in the profession. This included receiving job promotions and/or promotions in status, like moving from assistant to associate to full professors. Being invited to do something, whether it was giving a keynote, a talk, a presentation, joining an ALA interest group, or joining a committee, was considered especially validating. They made participants feel like they were well known, like their work was important. People who applied to programs that are considered competitive and prestigious, like the Institute for Research Design in Librarianship, ALA Emerging Leaders, or the Minnesota Institute for Early Career Librarians, were also very proud if they were accepted. 2 separate people talked about having 2 master's degrees as their proudest accomplishment. One said, unfortunately, some folks have made it seem like I was given things because I'm a person of color. I feel like I'm always telling people that I'm worthy of this job. I can say, nope, sorry, I have 2 master's degrees and you don't. Having 2 masters has been pretty nice to shut people up. Brittany and I also have 2 master's degrees, and we agree with this participant. Academia, which is built on white supremacy, racism, and sexism, makes us feel like we need to remind people of our multiple degrees in order to validate that we belong here. Tied with validating experiences were connecting experiences, and we will be talking about this throughout this presentation. These connections could be with students, colleagues, research collaborators, or affinity groups. Interviewees describe teaching classes to undergraduate students, supervising theses, creating BIPOC librarian affinity groups, and helping people at all levels develop their skills. Participants often mention the racial and ethnic backgrounds of the people involved in these connections, and James will talk more about this later, but I want to emphasize that those of us working in predominantly white institutions with predominantly white students and colleagues especially need opportunities to collaborate with and work with people outside of our institutions. 1/4 of participants described innovative research projects, roles, and opportunities as the work that they were most proud of. They also experienced fear, uncertainty, and failure, but they appreciated feeling that they had made an impact. Unfortunately, 2 of these 6 innovators left librarianship, so managers need to be particularly mindful about supporting our innovators. And finally, I want to point out that if your staff includes librarians of color are not fulfilled by any of that stuff, that is okay too. Several people felt like having a full-time job with benefits was itself their proudest accomplishment, and we are proud of you too. So our takeaways based on this analysis is professional orgs need to diversify their committees and specifically invite BIPOC librarians to participate in service, leadership, conference keynoting. Organizations who put on conferences, especially predominantly white ones, need to schedule dedicated time on the calendar for librarians of color to connect. Deans and managers need to ensure their workers have time for service work, research, and job duties that energize them. And they need to encourage workers to engage with the opportunities that excite and maybe scare them, and then support them in every way, including financially. Make it clear that the institution will support travel for being president of an ethnic affiliate, the same way it would support travel for being on ALA Council. Finally, everyone needs to champion librarians of color by suggesting them for prestigious appointments, writing letters of support for competitive programs, inviting them to do professional development or keynotes at institutions and conferences, and cite our research. Which brings us to champions, mentors, and role models. So we directly asked participants to tell us about someone who had supported them during their career, and we heard many anecdotes about champions, mentors, informal mentors, peer mentors, and role models. These people are essential to keeping librarians of color in academic libraries, but I'm going to start with the 4 people who left. So this participant followed the path that everyone says will lead to retention. He was involved in recruitment programs through ALA, ACRL, and ARL. He went to the Minnesota Institute, he did a residency, he published a lot. And when we asked him who supported or helped him, the only people he could think of was his family. He mentioned that he had assigned mentors, and he referenced that he had a lot of access to his library dean. But in our interview, the only specific example of support he made was that people wrote him letters of recommendation. So if you are a white librarian and all you have done for your BIPOC colleagues is write a letter of recommendation, you are not doing enough and you need to do more. This participant said, I just think what they saw in me wasn't the same thing I saw for myself or for the larger profession. And so I think as a result, I burned a number of bridges. They were also part of recruiting programs. They went to Spectrum, they went through ARL, and through those programs and their interest in critical librarianship, they described having relationships with many library thought leaders, both white and librarians of color, but they did not feel seen or supported by these people who should have been their mentor. It's so important for mentors and champions to really know their mentees, so they aren't just throwing them random opportunities, but actually helping them get the right opportunities for their specific career path and goals. I love this participant. My peer mentor increased my self-esteem so much that I was like, oh, I'm awesome. I can leave this field. I don't need them. They can make me feel like I'm not good enough, but I am good enough and I can do it and I can leave. They described that their greatest supporter was a peer mentor in the same career stage. And together they found out about conferences, they crafted proposals, they gave presentations without any support from any other colleagues, supervisors, or mentors. And finally, our only one who left but is still working in a library. I've been fortunate that I've had some good mentors. My assigned mentor just let me flourish, built on my strengths and helped direct me where I needed to go. My peer mentor provided me that honest feedback and direction without any motive except my personal self-interest. So she is very much the backbone that keeps me in librarianship. This person identified having multiple mentors who fulfilled different roles in her career, and they are part of the reason why she has stayed in librarianship, even though she was not retained in higher education. So that's the 4 who left. Of the 21 who stayed, they were just able to identify so many people who helped them out. And these champions were mostly white librarians because librarians are mostly white. Librarians with institutional power to help people are also even more white. So what do our champions know how to do for their BIPOC colleagues? They listen, and this is the most important thing. They cannot do anything else if they do not actually listen to and know the librarian, their goals, their strengths. So they ask questions, they answer questions, they give advice, commiserate, and they know when to do which one because they know the librarian that they are championing. Finally, they encourage, they see their librarian's potential and they use that information to continually boost their confidence. They do this formally by writing nominations for awards and letters of support, and they will always be a glowing reference because they want what is best for the person, not for the institution. They inform and share information about ALA, ACRL, they know about the ethnic affiliates, leadership development programs, conference opportunities, those committee work we talked about, academia, tenure, and the institution that they work for. They are especially helpful when they share unspoken rules or unwritten norms, which are often passed down through generations of professionalism that many BIPOC librarians didn't have access to because of generations of racism in the US and Canada. They strategize by helping librarians plan out their careers based on their goals, and they always, always, always help them earn more money. They support, they put the librarian's name in the ears and eyes of powerful people and advocate for them. When someone on campus or in the profession is looking for a person, they act as a sponsor for the librarian to be that person. When they are offered an opportunity that would benefit the librarian, they decline and recommend the other librarian instead. Yes, they are actually going to have to give up opportunities and power. They connect, they're able to introduce librarians to other people and help them network. Several of our participants specifically mentioned that their champion helped them navigate conferences by taking them to different sessions and introducing them to the people that they needed to meet. And finally, they collaborate. Tenure track participants mentioned the importance of having a mentor who could walk them through the research process, while non-tenure track people also enjoyed participating in research. It boosted their confidence. Other participants were able to serve on committees or join projects or communities of practice or develop their skills because a champion advocated for their participation. So, professional organizations and institutions need to train mentors how to be champions. Too many of our participants did have assigned mentors, but those were not the people that they identified as being greatly supportive and helpful in their careers. Deans and managers need to step up and do the work. Our champions were usually white. They were often in different institutions and sometimes in different institution types. So there's no excuse for not championing your BIPOC employees and colleagues. And finally, everyone needs to stop making excuses and start doing the work.
So now I will take over for the BIPOC librarian experience. In this section, I'll be discussing how the racial and ethnic identities of our interviewees play, have played, or continue to play a role in their experiences as librarians. I'll also issue a trigger warning now at the top of this section because some of what I'll talk about may be uncomfortable for those who experience similar things or have been marginalized in similar ways. It will also be uncomfortable for those of you who know you've participated in similar behavior. While the intention is not to chastise anyone, if something happens to make you uncomfortable here, I challenge you to sit with your discomfort and synthesize it after this presentation. If you're new to this subject matter, taking a look at our bibliography for resources at the end is a great place to start. So as for the questions we ask participants, how has your racial or ethnic identity influenced your career as a librarian? And what has prevented you from accomplishing what you wanted? The sections that follow include quoted answers to the questions just mentioned, and additionally frame obstacles directly related to identity-based challenges that may not be apparent to our non-BIPOC colleagues. I also want to point out that while our original query sought to make distinctions about why mid-career BIPOC librarians stay or leave the profession, a few additionally relevant themes that emerged from our interviews was that of career interruption and its effect on those who've chosen to stay as well. We'll start with how BIPOC identity affects academic library work. I quote, "My identity definitely 100% influenced my career. Now that I'm looking at other positions, I think, is this a position I can continue to advocate for tribal libraries or tribal librarians? Because if I don't feel like they can support that, then I can't work there. If I leave, I really doubt there will be another tribal member to take my position, and that's actually been part of my crisis. Do I continue to feel like I'm being mistreated for the rest of my life because I'm worried that what I've built in my community is going to be dismantled by a non-tribal member? Most people see this as being my library, and that's unfortunate because it's not. It's our library. But would a non-tribal member take care of it?" And devaluing DEI work. Academic libraries are very problematic because there's vocational awe and a lack of acknowledgement of how this profession was created, being steeped in white supremacy, that are both glaring and small. My work wasn't respected because it was diversity work, and my colleagues didn't care even if the profession claimed to. There was a culture of, it's diversity work, it's specialty work, it's work that does not take real intelligence. It doesn't matter to the profession. A second participant said, "It just burnt me out hearing these comments that people would say to me about it until it was popular to be woke, of course. Even then, it was very inauthentic performative allyship in a tokenism type way. I felt like there was no way to move up in my case, even with showing analytics, being invited to talks, and getting accepted to 12 different things in 1 year, which brings me to professional politics. When referring to politics within librarianship, we are talking about the often hidden rules and game playing necessary to get ahead, curry favor, or to be championed or selected. In academic libraries, this can look like not displaying or not knowing how to properly display concepts such as collegiality, professionalism, competence, and involvement, or how to skirt the lines of behaviors like factionalism, territorialism, or self-promotion. For example, honestly, other people's opinions about what they think I can do or what they think Black librarians in general can do has been incredibly thwarting. I think that as much as my colleagues say, you can't dwell too much on what other people think, the reality is that for a Black, non-binary, queer, disabled librarian, other people's opinions are going to make or break me often. It's a nice flowery thought to think that, but I shouldn't have to be a politician to be remarkably diplomatic about things, even when I disagree. As far as professionalism, The biggest stressor for me was definitely figuring out all of these unwritten rules that I didn't know and having to stumble my way through how to dress, how to look, how to talk, what you can and cannot say, that sort of business professionalism, but to the extreme in academic librarianship. And in navigating academia is bizarre land, and you're trying to do it without looking like you don't know what you're doing because you already have imposter syndrome, or whatever we want to call it, forced imposter syndrome in a way. When taking a look at residencies, so the residency was a faculty librarian position, so I had to do all of the tenure and promotion stuff, but it didn't count for anything. So if I would have been hired, I would have had to restart my clock. Then I was out on the market. In my next job, I was actually hired temporarily to fill a sabbatical gap. My ranking never changed because I wasn't there long enough. When talking about pay inequity, I've started to realize that this has become an issue in my institution quite a bit in terms of racialized librarians. I was just recently looking at the salary list that we have in our institution. I thought, whoa, this is quite interesting compared to other colleagues that are in the same years of service that have substantially higher pay. We have a merit system at our institution. That has been a hindrance in my career that I'm just starting to unravel and learn more about. As far as career interruption, there are literal costs of what I'm choosing to call career clock time, like lessened earning potential and getting stuck in the paying dues phases of gig librarianship. Institution bouncing comes with literal costs, such as moving expenses, and in a profession with a culture of reimbursement, librarians of color, who are more likely to be first-generation undergrads, graduate students, and then faculty, can't always afford to institution bounce for both financial and personal reasons. To take on this normal expense for career advancement, librarians of color often have to take on moving-related debt and place themselves in other financial precarity to get to the positions that are career stepping stones. Lastly, participants mentioned feelings of assumption during interview processes about their ability to succeed or during the course of work that simply felt unsafe. They felt as though they were being judged as less competent for coming from a lesser library or position type, like term, non-tenure track, or staff, or like if they were going to be the diverse solution for an institution to swoop in and fix the diversity quota. We had numerous participants mention that they felt something was off at a place they interviewed, and so didn't proceed even if offered a position because the cringe was so strong. Which brings us to gatekeeping. I think on some level, and this is probably across the board, you've got administrators, deans, department heads that need to just go. They're holding stuff up, they're trying to do things the old way, and they're getting in the way of progress. There's just a lot of hanging on and getting in the way. That was disappointing. And so our takeaways for this section include institutions need to be more transparent about the nuances of institutional knowledge, the political playing field, bureaucracy, policies, processes, and the hidden curriculum of culture. Deans and managers need to intentionally build librarian skills, especially those in temporary or underpaid jobs, like residency. Without it, those folks can be kept in the early career stage longer than their white counterparts. Create a list of competencies, hit them all in smart ways. Smart as in smart goals. Everyone needs to actively share information, stop the competitive and scarcity mindsets of academia, and collaborate. Which leads us into the next section, libraries, librarians, racism, and intersectionality. In this section, I'll be letting the experiences and direct quotes of interviewees speak mostly for themselves. The things you'll see in here have happened across institution types, different career levels, different areas of the US and Canada, and by BIPOC librarians of all racial and ethnic identities, but also other intersectional and cultural types. I'd like to re-refer to that trigger warning from above now. Please appreciate the vulnerability and bravery displayed by those who chose to share some of these moments with us. I would even go a step further to say, imagine if you had to hear these things over and over and over again in your place of work, and you are supposed to continue acting professional with people who have and sometimes intentionally do harm to you on a consistent basis. Whether it feels comfortable to hear or not, these experiences happen daily to librarians across the US and Canada. So while you will see that libraries are racist as the slide title, the implications is explicit for those who display this behavior as well, either knowingly or unknowingly. Slide 1. My first day, they had a welcoming party where a bunch of staff were invited to attend, and I was the only Black person in the room, and 2 colleagues were talking, and the manager said, "Well, I'm not going to hold you to some ridiculous standard. I'm not a slave driver." Next participant. I go to work every day knowing that I probably work with racists. I know that. However, they have been very, very good with not showing that to me. I have not had any situations where I felt like I personally was dealing with discrimination, but I wait for it every day. So there's always this level of tension where I'm like, is today going to be the day they really show me who they are? Next, I had a hard time making friends, and it was depressing. It was really isolating. So maybe things would have been different if my location were different, but who knows? It may not have been that different elsewhere. In this next section entitled Libraries Are Really, Really Racist, the next quotes are about how, well, libraries are really, really racist. I have to warn you that these are some of the hardest to hear and will be some of the hardest for me to read. First, people were always telling me I got opportunities because of my race. I heard that a lot. They never said because of your race, but they would say because you're diverse. Diverse is the new word to describe a BIPOC person. For one of our Middle Eastern participants, when I came back from parental leave, everyone's like, oh, pictures. So I had this picture of my daughter in this onesie that my cousin had got me with a non-English script. And I had a colleague say, oh, raising militants already? Next. There are incidents where I was mistaken for the other Chinese male in the library. I was congratulated for getting married. I thought, I didn't get married. What are you even talking about? I don't even have a partner yet. And then this is where the associate university librarian who's new says, oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were this other person. So in talking about humanity and personhood and how BIPOC hold intersectional identities, I just wanted to stop for a second and say that being mixed up with another colleague was one of the most dehumanizing experiences reported across all of our participants. A close second and third were that of isolation or totally being ignored by people who are supposed to be collegial, as just highlighted in the previous slides. This means some of our colleagues in this profession cannot be bothered to recognize enough personal traits of an individual human being long enough to acknowledge that their personhood is different from someone else's. That is shameful at the least, and definitely a definitive reason why people move on. So moving on to some intersectional quotes. There's a sexualization of Hispanic women. Being in the library and having somebody come up to me and say something that they would never say to someone else, like, oh, you're looking like a spicy Latina today, or wow, your ass looks really great in that skirt. Or I think another really hard thing that I've never really learned how to respond to is people are still like, oh, I thought you were a guy because I've only seen your name. Or they'll send me emails to Mr. X. I never respond to an email that starts with Mr. X. I don't care how professional of the person it is, they're not professional enough to tread carefully. And then lastly, we had a faculty staff dining room on campus. There was apparently a longstanding group of faculty, white faculty, who always sat at this one particular table. Well, they weren't there yet, and I put my tray down and started to sit down at this table, and this older white man said to me, this room is reserved for faculty and staff only. Identity politics are not a game for BIPOC librarians. BIPOC librarians bear the emotional labor of managing their colleagues' feelings and perceptions all the time. They should not also have to split their professional identity from their lived experience and have that be a professional concern. Librarian is an identity we come to at a much later time in life. So why should we have to sacrifice our lived experiences for the sake of professionalism? So our takeaways are, institutions need to move past toolkits and EDI 101. It's a whole scholarship area, y'all. You can and you should find new solutions. Your colleagues are creating the scholarship that contains them. Deans and managers need to prioritize training that addresses the growth edges of librarianship, like collection development, cataloging metadata, or interdepartmental collaboration, with a DEI lens embedded, not as an afterthought. There should be no excuse as to why people cannot learn about how to be better humans to their colleagues with minoritized identities. And everyone who wants folks of BIPOC identities to share their experiences in this endeavor needs to pay them. There's a cost to these interactions, so open up the coffers if you want them to revisit their emotional labor, pain, and trauma from their professional experiences. Deans and managers need to recognize their culpability in these interactions by not having an action plan for when they happen, because they will and they do happen. Deans and managers and HR need to believe those who report this behavior. It is an extreme risk to do so. Don't insult them by doing nothing. And everyone involved in the execution part of the reporting process needs to take swift, decisive action when this behavior is reported or overheard. Your employees do in fact have options to go outside of the library structure to get these situations resolved. Do you really want them to have to do that? And finally, everyone needs to stop feigning ignorance and surprise when hearing about these experiences. Recognize and reckon with the fact that America has a racist history, and we see evidence daily of its racist present. Racism is codified into so many of our systems. These slights should not be shocking at this point. Seriously commit to showing all of your colleagues humane anti-racist treatment, period. And in your place of work, no matter what your identity is, be an accomplice. Allyship isn't getting us anywhere.
All right. So we directly asked our participants, what could organizations do to keep librarians of color in the profession? Although they gave many different suggestions, I will talk about 3 major areas which arose from their answers. The first area, entitled Literally with Plus Bread, shares our participants' thoughts on developing communities, mentorship, and expanding diversity. The common thread here involves the connection we have with each other. The second area is called Catalyst, where our participants talked about workplace-related factors that are involved in retention. It was important for our participants to talk about improving the work environment and culture, the impact of managers and supervisors, being taken seriously and being seen as a person foremost. And lastly, I will talk about the most important thing our participants thought organizations could do for retention in the area I have entitled Whales. It is no secret, it's money. The word companion originates from Latin, com, together or with, and panis, spread. Academic mid-career librarians of color deeply emphasize the importance of positive social relationships as a factor in entering and staying in librarianship. Our participants have been in early career community development or mentorship, but noted that this diminished in the mid-career and wished such initiatives continued at this stage as well. Like many already, one participant noticed that early career diversity efforts have not resulted in enduring change over time, saying, I think community is something that we know is helpful to us. And I think there's all these different pipeline programs, and we have evidence that those don't work, and they haven't increased our numbers. We're still at 11% or something like that, even though we've been doing this since the 90s. I think finding different ways of doing community for mid-career people could be helpful. Some participants felt that when they were at the mid-career stage, they lost a lot of support they had from the early career stage, or were seeking more support when there was none. As one participant said, I think that for librarians of color, we need cohorts. So I don't think it's okay to be the only one at your institution. I think that you need other people. It would be really nice to have other people with me when I start to go through things that I haven't had while I've been here. I've had to seek it elsewhere. Developing a community at your institution remains important for retention. Having deep one-on-one relationships are critically important for academic mid-career librarians of color. And our participants said that, once again, continuing to develop mentorship programs can be helpful. One participant said it helped keep them in the profession, saying, I found that having peer, formal, and informal mentors over the course of my career was absolutely what helped me stay. So I think that's a big thing. Although our research was focused on the mid-career academic librarian of color, 2 of our participants did think it was important to keep diversity expansive and that any programs or initiatives should be inclusive. As one participant said, I think we need to be looking particularly at bringing in more people who are on the ability-disability spectrum into these fellowships. Because the way our libraries are, they're not for everybody. They're just not built and made for everybody. And we need more employees to surface that. And another said, I think that it's good if there's more librarians of color because we need more of them generally. But I think it would be cool to be with other people who identified as marginalized in their own ways. I would be okay if it was someone who's trans or maybe who's not Black, because it's like, well, you understand a lot of the ways that people are treated, who see you as different, and really have it built in and show how different people are treated. Like Brittany shared earlier, racist experiences so often intersect with other aspects, and the most effective retention efforts will recognize this and develop it into their community building and mentorship programs as well. So, professional organizations and institutions can develop or expand programs for developing communities or mentorships to the mid-career or late career stages, and individuals can be champions for one another, or just break bread with one another as well. A catalyst is a substance that increases the rate of a reaction without itself being consumed or changed. While nearly all of our interview participants did not leave libraries or the profession, the topics in this area seem to be factors which weighed heavily on whether they would stay or leave, or have seen other librarians of color leave over. The whiteness in academic libraries manifests as dysfunctional culture, poor management, and disrespect. It seems whiteness is what drives librarians of color out at quicker rates, but is always there, unchanging, despite our efforts. One of the most commonly mentioned things by our mid-career academic librarians of color was that institutions could do to improve retention is to take stock of their work environment or culture. As one participant said, look in the mirror. We have a retention issue because we do not look in the mirror and actually see what is uncomfortable, unwelcoming, and downright hostile in this workplace. I'm at another PWI, predominantly white institution. I've only worked at all these PWIs. And everybody in every single one of those PWIs have been like, oh, we're so nice. We're a really nice place. And we're like a family. Never be like a family. First, there should be a separation between work and family. And second, whenever people use that phrase, I seem to find out later that they operate like a toxic family. They're exploiting those things without the support and connectivity. So everybody thinks they're nice and nobody means to do harm and nobody wants to look in the mirror and get uncomfortable about it. Another participant similarly said, I think working towards an environment that is supportive, taking microaggressions seriously when things are reported, making sure that from the leadership down, there are not just words, but actions demonstrating inclusivity and demonstrating an interest in hearing different perspectives and different opinions. I think it's very easy to feel shut down. And all it takes is one or two experiences where you're like, I'm just not going to raise my hand anymore. It's not worth it. These quotes highlight the subtle ways in which the environment or culture of an institution can be seen or felt by different groups. Universities and colleges must frequently take stock of their climate, and even better, they should be prepared to decisively confront and act on this information. On an individual level, the manager or supervisor can be one of the most impactful relationships that you have, which our participants also surfaced in their interviews. Ideally, they would be your mentor or even your champion, but sometimes they are actively harmful. I would say that just looking internally at the organization, seeing who's in management and whether or not they have the skills that they need to be able to manage a team, and if their team feels supported by them. And if they don't, if there's no trust, that should be in some sort of evaluation. Much like the larger environment, academic libraries should also pay close attention to the relationship between managers and their workers. Like this previous participant said, accountability for supervisors, potentially through 360-degree evaluations or other mechanisms, may be incorporated. This is especially important because of the next two topics. Some of our participants answered simply when they were asked what organizations could do to keep librarians of color in the profession. Start to take seriously some of our ideas. Another said, listen to them is the simplest thing. Step one, listen. And lastly, I think creating respect for all people of color in the profession, whether they have an MLS, MLIS, whatever behind their name. Going back to what Brittany said, our participants wanted to be seen as people, with one almost pleading, just be decent human beings. Can we start there? Can we just be decent human beings? And another saying, I think the profession needs to recognize their worth, the values that they bring, and also understand the soft skills that people bring as well, and how those can be advantages to developing relationships, building communities. The basic desire to be taken seriously, seen as a person, listened, respected, was reiterated by our participants over and over again. This is a consequence of dysfunctional organizations which have long dismissed, ignored, and disrespected librarians of color. Professional organizations can recognize the worth of librarians of color and what they contribute. Institutions can continuously evaluate their climate and develop ways to provide feedback on managers and supervisors. And individuals can develop empathy and authenticity. So Wales is a song by Hail Mary Mallon. In the music video, two homeless puppets rap about the money that they don't have. And in Vegas, whales are also an industry term for big spending high rollers in gambling. Nearly everyone we talked to said that librarians of color could be better retained through some sort of increase in compensation. It could be increasing salaries, additional professional development, or additional leave or flexible work. These were the most commonly suggested methods, but there were other ideas included paying for moving or housing expenses, the library masters or other education, loans, or emotional labor. The most common refrain for retention was to simply pay more, with many participants saying tersely, pay us more, you can pay us. They really need to focus on pay equity. I think pay is important. Those who expanded on their answer said it was especially important for people of color, with one person saying, pay people for what they do, pay people appropriately for the work, and don't expect more out of them if you're not going to pay them. I think that's a big thing. I will tell you that I have reservations. I have always had reservations about recruiting more people of color into the field when we don't have enough jobs and the jobs don't pay well enough. And we're going to put you in debt because you went to graduate school for the field. So I wish that we would pay our people more. I think that's a really important thing. Like Brittany mentioned earlier, community was a key component to sustaining the careers of our participants. Because of this, there was an emphasis on providing additional funding for professional development, especially for librarians of color. One person said, I need financial support to travel so I can be with my people. Because I'm in a very rural, very wide area, support means money for travel, money to take on opportunities in communities that are more diverse. Lastly, two participants were vocal advocates in increasing leave or having more flexible work. Once again, they thought it was especially important for people of color to have. These were very long quotes, but they emphasize why. One person said, I think that we need to be more flexible around our policies around leave, like sick leave, and so that people can attend to their mental well-being as well. Because there are going to be some things, even in the most forward-thinking, progressive, inclusive library environment that you work in, you are still, as a person of color, dealing with all the BS that's happening outside your library. That's an added layer of stress, anxiety, and harm that's on top. And so you have to have the ability to make space for yourself so that you can be healthy around those things. A participant who left academic libraries for a nonprofit shared that at their new place of work, they were able to have additional leave and flexible work, saying mental health days would be helpful too. This last year, with all the violence against communities happening, Black and Asian American and other folks, we got days off to process some of these things going on, and white people didn't. And I love that. Sometimes I didn't take it. I didn't feel like it affected me. It wasn't for me, but sometimes I did. When stuff happened at the Capitol, we got a week to process that because we all felt we had this collective grief. That would never happen in an academic library, of course, but that isn't to say that you can't take that and think of creative ways to do something like that in your own organization. They continued, we also have a Black affinity group for employees, and they make recommendations about money, promotion, and benefits that the organization actually has listened to and then done. They recommended that we get 2 weeks of summer vacation extra, and they gave it to us. Do you know how morale boosting that is? To not only get 2 extra weeks of summer vacation, but to know you actually listened to the Black affinity group. Based on this feedback, professional organizations can create additional funds for librarians of color. Institutions can increase compensation in any way available and be creative with pay, time off, and flexible work. And individuals can advocate for each other's compensation.
All right. So a participant said, but did anything we create acknowledge the historical roots of white supremacy? So in doing the work, but not performatively. Now it's 10 years later, still no change, still the same demographic composition, still the same sort of issues that people of color are facing in academic librarianship. And it moved really slow. We just kept punting the real issues. We punted it from the committee phase to the form a subcommittee phase to the next phase after that for the next year. I couldn't take it anymore. I could not take it anymore. That was a respondent who left. And do the work and be accountable. What has your organization done since it wrote its diversity statement? At the very least, a diversity statement needs a yearly review and update, if not an assessment of effectiveness. Exactly what did you do to meet or increase those goals? Who is involved? Is there an embedded time-bound deadline? Are you intentionally and actively recruiting BIPOC, neurodivergent people, second or third career folks, or parents? If this is your goal, how are you making sure your processes are equitable? Is there a checklist or a rubric? If not, create one and actually use it. Refine and improve it. This is the work. Have an idea of the burdens these identities add to candidates if they're going through a process like job application and mitigate them where possible. There's plenty of literature, like this presentation and eventual publication, to consult. And then also reward financially and create opportunities for job satisfaction for BIPOC librarians that is not moving up into leadership. Assessing and monitoring, scope creep is a must. The burden for the charge of initiatives or the back-end bulk of the work, especially if they are EDI focused, often is unpaid and often falls to librarians of color. You should not expect this to be the norm. Along with this, you should be encouraging your BIPOC librarians' goals to be created for their professional development or career trajectory and not just organizational betterment, allowing their work to speak for their financial reward as opposed to making them shuck and jive to get extra money in various forms. Good work deserves reward. Don't make employees feel beholden because they are naturally excellent. Another participant said, I do worry that because there has been a lot of attention on diversity in the last few years or so because of really big events that have happened, that there's a push forward for different organizations to put out statements that we stand against this and that. But will the actions that are following that continue to be important after the news cycle changes? After, oh, we struck this committee, they produced recommendations, we did some of them, and yeah, that's fine. We've looked at our policies, it's good, we're now anti-racist. So our takeaways for this section are, deans and managers need to stop making announcements about statements and solidarity without accountability and teeth. Pay scholars with these lived experiences to consult as you develop programming or bring them in to train everyone in your library, including you. You also need to know the conferences and the names of librarians where this work is valued, where librarians of color can seek assistance, discuss their experiences freely, and not have fear of retribution. Deans and managers need to ensure their libraries have a diversity committee of some kind and be an active part of the process of that committee. Be a part of assessing its effectiveness. Use that rubric I mentioned before. Have a follow-up plan if an initiative misses the mark. And find a non-punitive mechanism for holding people accountable to their diversity goals if your organization has them. If you don't have diversity goals, new project. Deans and managers need to offer official support from their positional perch by verbally and publicly modeling their own commitment to supporting BIPOC librarians. Do the work to separate your business minds from the humanity lens of your direct reports. We are people and we deserve to be treated humanely. So here's our extensive bibliography if you'd like to come back later and investigate or learn further. Like we said, super extensive. And we have just a few minutes left for Q&A. Thanks for sticking out with us, y'all.
Yes, we're a little off on time, obviously, so I've been trying to answer questions in the chat, but Brittany, I think that you probably have the best resource for maybe trying to find a BIPOC mentor or career coach. The questioner is specifically a BIPOC woman in a middle management position. So I feel like you're a little more involved in career development than the rest of us might be.
Yeah, so I would say for this one, especially if you're looking for a sort of management mentor, I will say if you are unaware of there are several leadership programs we kind of glossed over, but I didn't know about these until I was at UNLV. So this year I'm in a program called the ARL LCDP program, which stands for Leadership Career Development Program. It does require that your institution sponsor you, but my cohort is phenomenal. I feel very humbled to be among them. And we all got assigned mentors who are in dean or administrator positions. And that's been very helpful. I would also recommend maybe some national collegiate or university groups. That might be a bigger place to mine for that kind of thing. There are also a few Facebook groups that are specifically for Black women in the academy, and I would look there.
Okay, I also want to say to the anonymous attendee who has been going through a really hard time, I think we definitely feel for you. It is not TMI. We definitely encourage you to seek help. I'm on Zoloft. I'm in therapy. I think especially in our communities, we need to destigmatize seeking out this kind of resources. But it sounds like, if your work has resources, if your community has resources, I highly recommend seeking them out. I have found it to be very helpful for me. And yes, for the person who asked about extra leave for BIPOC, that was a nonprofit organization where they were able to give leave. So I don't want to go more specific than that in order to make sure we're preserving the anonymity of our participants.
I think since our presentation was about retention, it's funny for, I think, me to say this, but we did interview people who left, and it was better for them that they did leave. So if you find that your workplace is very intolerable, it may be worth thinking about that as an option as well.
Yes,
And
thank you, James.
the last thing I'll add, because I see Shannon's back, I see this question about advice for a burnout while uplifting BIPOC library professionals. If you're a BIPOC supervisor yourself, you got to put your own oxygen mask on, so whatever form of self-care, for real. I do love bubble baths and all that, but racially responsive, liberatory justice stuff, whatever you got to do for that, do that first, and then you can offer those resources to your employees. I would also say they may not know you're a person. I know some of us have heard the saying, all skin folk ain't kin folk. Do they know you're safe? If they don't know you're safe, there may be a way for you to reach out in such a way that lets them know that. And so that's what I'll offer.
Yeah. And on the advice for avoiding burnout, I think James, Brittany, and I, all of our research really focuses on the experiences of librarians of color. So we are often, overwhelmed emotionally. And I think those things that James talked about for what organizations do, we find community with each other. Brittany and I get some sunshine every week. We share a cookie almost every week. We talk about everything. We invite some of our BIPOC colleagues, sometimes a white colleague. If you've been invited to our cookie dates, you should feel honored. But all of those things, taking time for yourself, taking time off, whether that's officially or unofficially, finding community, getting out of predominantly white spaces. I think that those are all things that we have found to be helpful. Although, we're not all necessarily retained or being retained either. So yeah. And I believe we're at time.
Yes, 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 yes. But before we wrap up, before we close out, I'm gonna just invite the audience to give Brittany, and James a round of applause for an amazing presentation, for also answering all of the questions. I saw you in the background answering offline and answering the questions in person. So thank you so much. It was, a pleasure to have you all come and share your research and share your experiences. So we do appreciate that. Before we close the session, I'd like to point out that the evaluation survey that is available for you to complete. I'm certain that our three panelists today would be very appreciative of your feedback on their research, or if you have something to share that can enhance their research, I'm sure they would welcome that. You'll find the link to the evaluation in Sketch. So when you log back in and go to this specific session, you will see a link for the feedback survey, and it is listed directly above the session description. So again, thank you all for attending. I hope you all enjoyed the presentation, and we will see you around the calm streets at some point this week. So thanks again for coming, and thanks again to the presenters. Y'all have a good one.